Let's just jump right into this. If you think Cornel novel, Dracula Next, Sanguis Ignis is just, another typical vampire story, we'll prepare to be completely surprised. In this explainer, we're diving into a narrative that brilliantly mashes up historical reality, ancient alchemy, and some very real modern scientific dilemmas. We'll be following a modern-day protagonist who literally stumbles right into a web of centuries-old secrets hidden deep in the rugged Carpathian Mountains. So we're going to explore the actual history of a notorious ruler, laugh at some incredibly relatable mountain mishaps, and ultimately confront the very energy that drives our entire world. Okay, picture this. Our main guy has just dragged himself up 1,480 exhausting steps to the ruined Ponari citadel in Romania. He trips on a rock, classic, right? And falls into this hidden, smoke-blackened chamber. It smells like, well, centuries-old dampness. And right there, next to a ruined oven and some old copper pots, he finds a soot-covered tile with a super cryptic Latin inscription carved into it, Sin sanguine aqua vitae nihil est. Now, this inscription is absolutely crucial. It acts as the ultimate hook for our whole journey, really bridging the gap between medieval alchemy and a modern-day scientific mystery. So what exactly does that mean? We really need to understand this alchemical concept of sanguis ignis, which translates to the blood of fire. Basically, the full translation of that cryptic Latin phrase is telling us that without blood, the water of life, which is alcohol, is nothing. But when you unite the two with fire, they transform into this invisible spirit born of heat. And this spirit doesn't feed the physical body, instead it sets the things of the world in motion. It's a wild concept. It challenges us to ask, where does the energy that drives both our modern society and our inner souls actually come from? Is it fuel? Is it ambition? Or, maybe something a bit darker? That brings us to part 1, Misterio l'Energia, the mystery of energy. And this ancient mystery lands squarely in the lap of our protagonist, Tom.
Now, Tom is a physics PhD student hailing from Nuremberg, Bavaria. He's not just sitting around studying levers and pulleys, though. He is quite literally playing with fire. His research is all about the generation and propagation of energy and combustion. So imagine being a scientist whose entire life revolves around studying how energy moves, and suddenly you encounter a medieval alchemical formula about a spirit of fire. The collision of these two worlds sets off a massive intellectual spark. But you might be wondering, how does a Bavarian physicist end up wandering the remote Romanian wilderness in the first place? Well, he's actually running away from a spectacularly bad breakup. His partner basically packed up and abruptly left for Australia. So Top loads up a heavy backpack with army biscuits, a tent, and an aluminum water bottle and hikes deep into the Fagarash Mountains. He figures, hey, if she can flee to the other side of the planet, I'm going to go hunt down the real, historical Dracula in the peaks of Transylvania.
Which brings us to part 2, Mythal versus Adevărul istoric, myth versus historical truth.
As Tom treks deeper into a mountain clearing, he actually bumps into a group of local Romanian hikers. They invite him over, share a campfire, some cold beers, and thick slices of bacon roasted on sticks. Sounds amazing, honestly. And as the fire casts these long shadows, the group helps peel back the layers of Romania's most famous and misunderstood legend. Guided by Gigi, one of the hikers who just happens to be a medieval history PhD student, this campfire chat turns into a literal masterclass on the real man behind the myth. It is so vital here to separate the Hollywood folklore of the blood drinker from the very real, highly educated military strategist. Gigi explains that Vlad's father actually received the Order of the Dragon from the King of the Holy Roman Empire right in Tom's hometown of Nuremberg. Since the order featured a dragon and local peasants weren't exactly familiar with dragons, they just called him Dracu, meaning the devil or the dragon. And his son, he became Dracula. So definitely not a supernatural monster. He was a fiercely intelligent, albeit absolutely brutal, prince fighting to survive.
Looking at the timeline here, we can see Vlad's calculated approach to power was really forged in blood. Born in 1431, he grew up in an incredibly ruthless political landscape, but a major turning point hits in 1459 during the Easter Massacre. To avenge his father's assassination by treacherous local nobles, the boyars, Vlad invites them all to a massive feast in a grand tent. And here is the horrific genius of his plan. His men slit live rabbits over pots of boiling alcohol. This creates a massive chemical flare, a literal blood of fire that ignites the entire tent. The terrified nobles who fled were captured, impaled, or marched off to grueling forced labor to rebuild his fortress. Fast forward to 1462, and the things escalate wildly. Sultan Mehmed II sends a staggering 60,000 troops to destroy Vlad. Think about that number for a second.
To put it into perspective, that's enough soldiers to completely pack a modern sports stadium, and we're talking elite Janissaries cavalry and artillery. Vlad's forces were less than half that size, mostly consisting of local peasants and minor nobles. On paper, it was an impossible fight. But Vlad did not fight conventionally. He used his intimate knowledge of this rugged, unforgiving mountain terrain to launch a relentless guerrilla campaign. He attacked supply lines and hit outposts under the cover of darkness. And of course, he used sheer psychological terror. He created the infamous Forest of Spikes, displaying thousands of impaled victims outside the Ottoman camps. Can you imagine waking up as an elite soldier to that horrifying sight? It was a psychological masterstroke that ultimately forced an army twice his size to just turn around and retreat.
All right, moving to part 3. Aventura și umor pe munte. Adventure and humor on the mountain.
Because, this story isn't just about heavy, dark history. It perfectly balances out all that tension with some laugh-out-loud modern-day adventures. The weight of medieval warfare is constantly broken up by the extremely relatable, comical struggles of Tom and his new friends. They're dealing with the physical exhaustion of climbing the Fagarush peaks, sleeping like sardines in tiny mountain refuges, and dealing with eccentric tourists, which sets up this fantastic scenario during a freezing night at Cabana Ternary. The cabin is absolutely ice-cold. The grumpy caretaker swears there's no wood, but our hikers manage to secretly find a stash of logs and decide to take matters into their own hands. It really asks the ultimate survival question. How exactly do you heat a freezing cabin when you are desperately cold and entirely lack moderation?
While spoiler alert, it leads to a hilarious, cascading disaster. It's a brilliant illustration of the comedy of human greed. First, they completely overstuffed this terracotta stove. It gets so hot it starts shaking like a runaway steam locomotive until the intense heat literally cracks the clay. In a total panic, someone gets the colossal idea to wrap the burning hot stove in transparent plastic packaging tape. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Naturally, the tape instantly melts, filling this tiny crowded room with thick, toxic smoke. So they wanted an all-you-can-heat sauna, but they ended up freezing anyway because they had to throw open all the windows just to breathe.
That takes us to Part 4, Trecutul Antic, Prezentul Modern, the ancient past and the modern present.
This ridiculous struggle for warmth actually brings us right to the core of the story, where the ancient past smashes directly into our modern world. Whether it's Vlad Tepes burning a tent with an alchemical mix of alcohol and blood, or modern hikers choking on melting plastic tape to stay warm, the source material weaves these timelines together to show that our desperate pursuit of energy really hasn't changed. Why this matters today is perfectly captured in a very neutral yet fiery campfire debate among the hikers. One hiker passionately argues about our economic reliance on fossil fuels, pointing out how major global players like Russia and Saudi Arabia fund their entire infrastructures with oil and gas, questioning the feasibility of a sudden green transition. Others counter that with the urgent reality of climate change, massive global emissions, and the absolute necessity of solar and wind power. The novel uses this back and forth to brilliantly point out that humanity is still fighting over the exact same invisible forces that move the world. We've literally just swapped out the words alchemy and blood for emissions and geopolitics. We see this beautiful convergence of eras later on, when Tom wanders off the trail and stumbles upon a traditional shepherd's camp. He sits there watching them milk the sheep and craft cheese using rennet and wooden vats, following techniques that have been untouched for centuries. It's like stepping back in time. But then, when he sits down to eat with them, a light bulb flickers on overhead. He asks how they have power up there, and they just point outside to modern solar panels charging an old truck battery. It is such a perfect, striking visual of the old world and the new world existing in absolute harmony.
As the night deepens, the shepherds share a hushed story with Tom, which brings us to the end of our explainer today. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What mystical truth actually lies hidden in their legend of the shadow under the ridge? Is it really just a story of the wind and the mountains, or does that invisible spirit of Sanguis Ignis still wander the dark peaks of the Carpathians? And maybe more importantly, what is Tom going to uncover next as he steps further into the shadows? Well, you are definitely going to have to dive into the source material to find out. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.